Hey, co-host Adrian here, and out of all the thousands of available podcasts, you're listening to this one because you love Evansville. Well, we obviously love Evansville too, but we can't tell these stories without the support of people like you. So before we get started with today's episode, we want to give you the opportunity to partner with our storytelling work here at For Evansville. Your donation will allow us to continue to share these unique stories about how people are working together to make Evansville a place where everyone can flourish. And the cool news is right now we have a $50,000 match, so any gift you give will be doubled. So help us complete the match before the end of the year by going to forevansville.org/podcast partner, or you can find the link in the show notes. Thanks for being For Evansville. Hi, welcome to the For Evansville podcast. My name is Adrian. I'm here with Karen and Casey today. I'm super looking forward to this conversation. We just want to explain the needs and dreams of our city so that you can be more for Evansville. So if you just want to introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump right in.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm Karen Malone. I'm the Curator of Education at the Evansville Museum of Art, History, and Science.
Oh, so you're a Curator of Education.
Yes. So at the Evansville Museum, we do have an art curator, a history curator, and science curator. And my job is to help people engage with all of that. So they're the content experts, but I'm an expert on how people learn in museum settings. So that's everything from field trips to how people engage with the exhibitions to tours, lots of different things.
Oh, cool. Okay. Thank you for explaining that because I did not know that.
Awesome. And I'm Casey DePriest, and I'm the founder and CEO of Optimal Rhythms. And I'm excited to be here and excited
Can you
for
tell
this
us a little
conversation.
bit about Optimal Rhythms?
Sure. So we're a nonprofit that supports individuals and families affected by autism. We have a therapeutic day school that serves students both locally and all across the country. And our students are primarily non-speaking or non-reliably speaking with neurodiversities, primarily autism. And however, our curriculum is all general education, and all of our students are working towards a high school diploma.
Wow, that's great. Okay. So us having you both on here sounds like how could that be connected? But now as you've explained your job more, and my experience with how I met both of you was there is an exhibit at the museum. Can you explain what the exhibit is? And we'll just launch from there.
Yes, it's called Spectrum Dynamic, and it'll be on display until January 1st. Okay. And it an art professor at IU Bloomington took motion capture and 3D imaging of people fidgeting or stimming. So stimming is stereotyping where people will move to sometimes get rid of nervous energy or to process what's going around them or emotions. And lots of people do this. Almost everyone fidgets, but is often really common with people who are autistic. Mm-hmm. So this imagery captured these people moving, and then along with them created colors, and it's very almost abstract, and they're bright and they're colorful and they're printed on aluminum. And it's a wonderful celebration of both people's differences, but also the art behind it. It's really neat.
And so you were there bringing a group, and do you just want to talk about that whole experience? There's a lot to dig into, but maybe as an overall experience with your group doing this.
So I first heard about the exhibit at the Big Table meeting, which if you're not familiar with that, it's where a lot of different nonprofits or organizations within the community get together. It's sponsored by EVSC. And so we heard about it there, and I immediately was intrigued because our approach at Optimal Rhythms, our approach to autism is different than a lot of the traditional programs or, focus that a lot of different treatment types of programs have, where we look beyond behavior at what's happening neurologically. And what neuroscience is teaching us is that a lot of things that we once thought were behaviors in autism are actually movement differences. And so a lot of the individuals that we support, once they have communication, they describe that they have all these struggles with their body or ways that they move their body to help them cope or help them process sensory information or help them to regulate. And by allowing them to do that, it actually allows them to be more present, allows them to be better able to access the community and so on. So So I'm always really interested to know that people recognize the movements of autism and that that's not just something that's hidden in a corner somewhere. And then as Karen just described so beautifully, it's a celebration. Like this was described as a celebration of these movements and the diversity, a visual picture of the diversity related to those movements. So I got really excited and went back and talked to some of our students and other individuals that we serve within the community to let them know about the exhibit and see if any of them would be interested in coming and experiencing that. So we got with Karen and planned a day to bring several people out to experience the exhibit and give us feedback about it. What did they think? So it was a really great day, and I'm excited to tell you more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I walked in because I got to join you, and I've got to say, I've talked about it a lot, and it seems like a kind of dramatic thing to say, but I truly feel like it was kind of a life-changing experience for me. And so walking in there, one of the boys said, it's nice to see my movements as art and as beautiful instead of something that is unfamiliar and maybe sometimes off-putting or scary. And just that phrase right away, I was like, this is worth it. This whole exhibit is worth it for them to see themselves as beautiful people in our community that provide value. And so I walked into a good question. One of the people that you serve was asking just about your job and how you brought the art in. And so can you guys talk about that kind of exchange?
Yes, absolutely. So we were approached by Caleb Weintraub. He's the professor who created the art, and he sent it to our executive director, Mary Bauer. And at that point, we were actually in between art curators. And I'm both physically disabled, and I fall on the neurodiverse spectrum, which can be everything from autism to ADHD to dyslexia. There's a lot of things that fall in there. And she knows this, and she's incredibly supportive of making sure I have a work environment where I can really thrive and help the museum. And so she sent this to me and says, what do you think as someone, who falls in these categories? And I said, it looks really cool, but I really want to make sure we talk to Caleb, because so many times in our culture, we can other people through our art. We can say, oh, look how strange they are. Let's put them on display. So I was able to have a conversation with Caleb, and he was just awesome. He worked with people. He really wanted to make sure they felt comfortable and their input was valued. So that was just fantastic. So I went back to Mary and said, oh, this is so cool. And I think people would really appreciate being able to see this on display, and we were able to get it.
So one of the things that we talk about in our services and in our work is that we want our work to be informed by autistic people. We want the programs that we develop. We want the strategies that we provide. We want the conversations that we have to be informed by people with the lived experience of autism. We don't want to be sitting around as experts trying to tell people what it's like to be autistic or what to do to help someone with autism. We really want people to be able to inform that. So we have this quote that we say that's nothing about us without us. And so as I was talking to Karen about the exhibit, and my first question was, were autistic people involved in this beyond just tracking their body movements? And she described that conversation she'd had with Caleb. And I was like, okay, this is a good fit. This is great, because this is exactly what we want to do within the community to help people understand, to create awareness, but also to create acceptance and go beyond that awareness piece. And so now, we just want people to come out and see the exhibit and to experience it, but also to hear what autistic people think about it and how they experienced it. And going back to the conversation that was had there as you walked into the museum, one of our individuals was so excited to meet Karen and to hear about her own experience and the job that she has and the things that she gets to do and all of the support that she has to do that job so well. And his lived experience is quite different. So autism, having an autism or neurodiversity label, has led him to be in self-contained classrooms. It's led for him to be very isolated It's led for him to be presumed incompetent instead of presumed competent. People tend to focus more on the deficits that he experiences as opposed to his strengths. And after getting to know him for the last several years, I can tell you he is an incredibly bright, intelligent, creative, funny guy. So it was really heartwarming for me to watch him interact with Karen. And his first question was, how do you get people to know you're smart? How do you get people to give you a chance? And so they had a really cool conversation about all of that and her experience of being a person who's neurodiverse, but still is accepted within the community. And so, my hope and my request of the community, I guess, is let's make that available for everyone, for Evansville, for everyone, because there are a lot of people that don't have that shared experience yet.
Yes. And when I was reading a lot about autism and neurodiversity, I came across a quote that really stuck with me. And they said, it's like people have operating systems, and some people are PCs and some people are Macintoshes, and they're both valid. Yeah. It's just we do different things, and sometimes we have trouble communicating. If you've ever tried to send like a file between the two of them,
yeah, of course.
But there's strengths and weaknesses, and that to me really spoke. It's not necessarily one's worse than the other. There are differences, and the world would not be as good unless we had PCs and Macs. So.
That is true. So as you were saying, your hope for the community is to create more spaces like this. What, for both of you, my question is, how can they do that? How can you create or have the mindset of other Mary Bowers, how can businesses kind of jump into that world? What would help them?
Ooh, that is a phenomenal question. Mary is such a good listener. And, it's kind of been an evolution. I've been at the museum for 9 years, and my needs have evolved. And really, don't assume you know what's best for somebody. And I'm trying to think, for example, I have a really cool work schedule. I get to be at the museum in the morning, and I work from home in the afternoon. And that's great. It lets me sit down and lets me rest. It gives me a break from being around people. We can be flexible if there's like an afternoon meeting. But that was, that's different. So that's been so helpful to me. I'm pausing. Do you?
So our school is now virtual. We used to be in person, and our school is now virtual. And a lot of people are like, well, how do you have an autistic person sit in front of a computer all day? And for our students, we listen to them. They said it's so hard for us to be with other students and manage our sensory needs while everybody else is trying to manage their own sensory needs, and just be in a school environment. It's very overstimulating. It's very dysregulating. And then when we get dysregulated, then we're seen as having behavior. And then someone tries to address our behavior, and we lose the opportunity to learn. And so our school is called Access Academy, and Access stands for Assuming Competence Can Ensure Student Success. And so not only do we assume that they have the potential to learn and age-appropriate things, but we also assume that they have the ability to inform what they need, and we listen. And so I love what you said, is my boss listens to me, our students' teachers and our staff listen to our students. And I think that is a huge key to what we can do within the community. We need to listen to everyone. We don't need to just listen to people who are neurotypical, or not just listen to people that are already in positions to make decisions, but let's include other people within the conversations that maybe have never been a part of the conversation. And I feel like that's what we did at the museum last week. I feel like we really we opened up the doors so that everybody could have a say, and everybody could, inform the exhibit, the experience at the museum, the city. There were talks about the town and, the city of Evansville, and what's really working, and what things, we still need to work on. So there are really important conversations to be had. And as far as employment, what I love about Karen's story is that she is gifted, And her giftedness became the focus when she was hired for this position. And she's clearly perfectly enabled for this position. And sometimes what I find working in disability services, I've been an Indiana Medicaid waiver provider for many, many years, and working within the Medicaid waiver program with people with disabilities, that oftentimes the jobs that are available are not well suited for the individuals. They're just the things that somebody else had a great idea, like some repetitive job. Oh, we teach it to them once and then they can do it for the rest of their life. Well, the people that I know that are neurodiverse, that's not really how they roll. They need to be stimulated. They need creativity. Also, sometimes, and I don't know that this is necessarily an issue for you, Karen, but for a lot of the individuals that I serve that have high support needs because they have a high level of apraxia, which is a motor disability as related to their autism, they are oftentimes pegged for or given jobs, even like social skill types of jobs that are highly motor intensive, so it requires them to have a lot of motor planning ability and to do that with great accuracy. And that's their weakness. They have all these strengths. They're really good at empathy. They're really good at understanding people. They're good at understanding systems. They're great problem solvers, but they may not be good at using their body to do physical things. Unfortunately, those are usually the jobs that are offered. So, we really need to, first of all, presume that these individuals are competent and that they have intellectual gifts, and then find ways to use those in meaningful ways and not just put them on an assembly line doing the same thing over and over again, because they really have different types of gifts that I think we haven't even tapped into. Yeah, I think there are jobs that they could do that we really need, but we haven't even identified what those jobs are.
Yeah, and I appreciated that when I was there. I was trying to do some kind of research for this podcast episode, and I just asked, like, what's the appropriate term to use? Like autistic versus person with autism. We're having that conversation, and I think it was you just stopped and said, "Well, let's ask them. Like, let's ask them what they would prefer to be called." And even that act right there of just constantly doing things like that showed me as a new kind of newcomer to this world, how to treat people. Like, yeah, just why wouldn't I just think to ask them? But it's almost retraining myself. So you said that you had a chance to talk to them about what our city is doing well and what it's not doing, what could be improved. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of that feedback? What is Evansville doing well in this area?
So there are several organizations. There's Autism Evansville that's doing a great job of connecting families and helping to create some safe spaces for families to go if the parents are autistic or if their child has autism or experiences neurodiversity. We provide a camp every summer, what's called Can Do Camp, and it's really for all ages. And we are really the first camp that has been available for individuals with higher support needs, because a lot of the other camps just wouldn't be appropriate or the staffing levels wouldn't be appropriate. The fact that we have a school that is specifically designed for what we call twice exceptional students, so students that have high intelligence and great academic prowess or potential, but they do have high support needs. So those things I think are going really well. I think we've sponsored some conferences called the Rethinking Autism Conference that we've had teachers come to, we've had therapists come to, we've had other community members be a part of that. So I think there's a real interest in learning to understand who these individuals are and how they fit into the community. I still think, though, and this is something that the students were describing, is that there's still a real disconnect with the schools. A lot of times the schools are really, like, from the time a child is diagnosed, they're kind of already sent down a disability pipeline.
Okay.
And they start getting services, which is great in early intervention, but the assessment of those students is very difficult because if we don't understand that they have a movement disorder and then we give them standardized tests for kids that don't have movement disorders, then they don't really have a good way of responding to those tests. And of course, then they're going to be scored to have a low IQ or low academic potential. And so then they get placed in classes where they don't get stimulated academically, where they don't get opportunities, and where they frankly don't get the support that they need to be successful. So, I work with a lot of students that have had that experience, and that's something that we as an organization would really like to have more conversations about, help support. We provide a lot of training within the community, both here locally and across the country, and we would like to be able to, provide more training to teachers and paraprofessionals and so on. So I think that's a big need. And then also just in general, just recognizing how many individuals in the community potentially are quite isolated because they don't have the supports that they need or the opportunities that they need. Research is now saying that up to about 40% of all autistic people are non-speaking or non-reliably speaking, which is kind of shocking for some of us probably to think about. And that translates to 31 million people in the world that are non-speaking. And, imagine not being able to use your speech for communication. So now that we understand more about movement differences, we recognize that that is also affecting speech movement, and that you can have a difficulty with speech, which is motor, and not have a difficulty with language. So previously, and still yet, there are a lot of people who assume if someone doesn't have speech, then they don't yet have language and they're not thinking. So we like to say non-speaking does not mean non-thinking. Right?
Yeah.
So just having more awareness about the number of people that are potentially really affected by these movement differences that were celebrated during the Spectrum Dynamic exhibition. But and then taking that further. Okay, so if we can celebrate those movements in art, how can we celebrate those movements in person? How can we accept and recognize if someone is flapping their hands or rocking or jumping to regulate themselves, to process all the sensory information around them, then we need to be okay with that. We need to recognize that that's who they are. That's a part of their neurodiversity. It's not something that's weird. It's not something that, should be shut down or that they should be judged for. So just to have more awareness, I think will bring more acceptance and then bring more inclusion within the community.
Yeah. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Well, I've been thinking about the question you asked, what businesses can do. And, it was actually just ties right into what you said was, professionalism can look different. And we have oftentimes this very one size fits all for professionalism. And the first thing that jumped out, I can't wear high heels. My ankles won't support it, and it's a sensory thing. So I wear sneakers all the time, and I work in a business that's like, that's okay. Those are little things that can actually, keep someone from pursuing a career in certain ways. But I was thinking about, the speaking differences. Sometimes I can get so tired and so overwhelmed, I actually start to slur my words and have trouble speaking. And I've been in some really important meetings when this has happened. And luckily, because of my boss, I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm getting really tired. I'm having trouble slurring my words. I'm still really, with this meeting. And everyone's like, okay. And they don't make me feel bad about it. They don't, you don't feel unprofessional. They're like, okay, she's doing this now. And so that's really huge. And I think just that when that happened, that meant such a lot to me, and having that for people.
I love that they're creating that environment for you. That, to me, that's just a really good example of what our business can do. I love what you said about professionalism can look different. That's such a great phrase. I would love to hear more about just the feedback from the both of you, feedback you've heard and the feedback that you got from your students and other people that use your organization. So let's just talk about the kind of the feedback from this art. What did it bring up in people?
We have a lot of field trips that come to the museum. And the great thing is they come into our lobby space, which is where the exhibition is on display. And the kids love it. They love the colors. They love how it looks. And then I get to explain to them what it is. And a lot of these kids, they either stim, they know someone in their class who stims, they have a sibling, and they get so excited because they're being celebrated. And we also have on display, I've created a fidget toy basket that people can try it out for themselves. And then they gravitate right towards that. So they get to try it out. But just today, actually, right before I left to come over here, I have a field trip here. And these 2 fourth graders are standing looking at the art. And one of the kid leans over. She goes, "This is awesome." And the other kid goes, "I know." And it was just like, oh, yeah.
That's so cool just to get this early education. That's what I'm saying is I'm learning so much from looking at this exhibit now as a, 34-year-old. But I think about the kids that this is impacting. It's making this more normal, more accepted, more beautiful to see that there are people that are different, that the experience in the stimming is not a scary thing. It can be a really cool thing or a beautiful thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
How about you?
So I remember one of our students was describing that the piece that was called Loop was really interesting to them because they find themselves doing a lot of motor loops, particularly in tasks that they've been kind of drilled to do. They do them over and over again and get kind of stuck. And that's not something that they like. It makes them very uncomfortable, makes them frustrated, particularly if people don't understand that they're stuck and think they want to be doing that. And so they like that was represented. They felt like that was a great educational tool to help someone who might be uncomfortable looking at an autistic body that's stuck, but to look at a piece of art and be able to understand that is their experience, and it can be beautiful, and it can represent that person in a non-threatening way. So that was an example. One of the little boys that came was really mesmerized. I can't remember the name of the piece, but it was the one that has like the little boxes of color.
Yes, body English. Yes.
Okay, body English, yes. He said that's me. That's me. And he just could really identify and see himself in that art. And these are kids that oftentimes, feel like nobody else is like them and that the people just don't understand. So I think it was really powerful for him to feel not only represented, but understood by the artist.
Yeah, because even I remember seeing him drawn to that, and it was interesting because each piece, like some are more obvious, like okay, that person's in a loop, you can tell their body movements, but some I had no idea what was going on. You can kind of see the shape of a person still, but you don't really know what body movements they are making. But to see the individuals relate and say that's me, and me not knowing at all, but them being represented was again really just eye-opening to see that. Yeah, anything else? I feel like we could talk about this all day.
I think we could. I definitely
but
think we
I just
could.
want to just cover just tying this back into making Evansville a place where everyone can flourish. And as you're saying, the numbers are high of the amount of neurodivergent people in our community and how to support them. We want that community to be able to flourish as well. So I love to see the collaboration that you guys are doing with the EVSC, with the museum. All of this is kind of working together just to raise more awareness, but also to help people just have tools in their toolbox. So I was thinking as you were saying, like seeing those movements, as we're talking about seeing them as beautiful, non-threatening. Just me as a person on the street, if I'm most likely, going to have friends, family members that experience these type of things. So what can I do to help? Or do I do anything? Do I let them ride it out? Like if they're stimming, I guess.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that if someone's moving, there's a reason that they're moving. It's also safe to know that if someone's doing something with their body that looks unusual, they may or may not be wanting to do that, but nonetheless, that is their experience in that moment. So I would say, just be in it with them. I know our students benefit a lot from what we call co-regulation. And if somebody is getting really upset around them or is giving them a dirty look or is being judgmental, they sense that immediately. And so I think if we can engage with people in an open, calm way, where we recognize if we stay in good energy, that person's likely to stay in good energy. And even if they're moving differently, we want them to feel accepted and we want them to feel a part of what's going on. So just be with them in that space, be with them in that movement. And then ask them. And one of the challenges that we have with non-speaking people is that they don't have access to communication. So one of the things I'd love to see our community do is to get more equipped to support individuals who have communication difficulties or communication challenges. One of the things we're doing as an organization is we have started the Keep Me Safe campaign with the Evansville Police Department. And so there's now a registry that individuals can sign up for, or families can sign a child up if that child would potentially be vulnerable in a crisis or in a situation within the community where they were not understood. And so we're partnering with EPD to also bring training to officers about some strategies that they can use to do just simple things, co-regulation, providing for their sensory needs, and making sure that you're not presuming that they're doing something because they're trying to be mean or nasty, but they might just be struggling with their body. And then some communication strategies as well. So we're trying to make sure that, particularly in crisis situations, those individuals are safe and aren't more vulnerable than they already are. But then also hoping that training will carry over to just the day-to-day, to parents, giving parents more ideas of how to support their children so that, they take them out in the community. Sometimes we hear from families, we just don't go anywhere because we don't want to get the looks, or we don't go anywhere because we're not sure what our child is going to do and we don't know how to help them. So making sure that parents are equipped, making sure it's a conversation that's safe to have so that they don't feel alone and isolated. I think those are some things that we can do.
And I would think acknowledging that your reality might be different from my reality. My senses are very heightened. I can hear extremely well. I can hear electricity go through electric lights. One time I was having a sensory overload episode, and I was at a table, and somebody had a can of LaCroix, and they had opened it, and I could hear the bubbles popping.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to lose it. So it may not be loud or hot or just itchy to you, but understanding. Don't argue with people, because sometimes people will argue with you. Oh, it's not that loud. It is to me. And the other thing, I think there's just this kind of a respect we can all have is people shouldn't necessarily have to label themselves or even say, hey, I have this in order to get respect. But also a lot of people don't know. So just, it's okay. People are different.
So as we wrap up, I just want to ask if there's anything that you thought you wanted to talk about today that we did not cover.
The only thing that I think that I would just like to drive home a little bit, because it is so important in the work that we do and important to the people that we work with, is that the way that a person experiences the world should really be understood as the way that person experiences the world. And just because it looks different or sounds different or is communicated differently doesn't mean that it's bad. And we're really skilled in our culture to watch people with our eyes and make assessments or make judgments about them based on what we see. And I guess the message that I would like to leave us with is that I have learned the hard way, because I didn't always understand this, but I have learned that there's so much about neurodiverse people that you get if you turn off your eyes and just listen, or just be with them, just get to know them. And so I'd like us to get away from this behavioral mindset of everybody has to behave the same, everybody has to look the same, everybody has to stand in line and follow the rules just the same, because life is just so beautiful. as evidenced by that art, when we are allowed to move in the ways that we need to move to be safe and to be comfortable, and when we're accepted for the differences that we have. So I think that not everything is about behavior, but we all have really capable brains and bodies, and they just sometimes are different. So
yeah, that's great. So if people want to see this exhibit, because if I was listening to this for the first time, I'd want to flock there. So how can people go see it?
So it'll be up till January 1st, and we're open Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. And the one thing I'd like to leave people is, even though this exhibit will be closing, our commitment to our neurodiverse community, our community members with disabilities, and just to the community in general isn't going to stop. It's, we've got a bunch of exhibitions coming up, and our programs. So I think I'm running out of words, but I just because the exhibit's going to be finished doesn't mean we're finished at the museum.
And as just remembering our visit, one of our students who spells on a letterboard to communicate. Some of you might be wondering, well, if they're non-speaking, how do they communicate? So our students do communicate quite effectively, but one of them said, as we were wrapping up our visit, he asked Karen, so how do I get my art here at the museum? And she had great answers for him about how he could go about. So that's really exciting to think about, that this isn't just a one-time thing for us to celebrate, but there's so much to look forward to in a collaboration with the museum.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, but also just for the work that both of you are doing in the community. Thank you for being for Evansville. So thanks for being on here today.
Thank you so much for inviting us.